Welcome to the So You Want to Be a Data Scientist podcast. Here we interview awesome data scientists and other data professionals. This show is part of the website soyouwannabeadatascientist.com. After listening, take my free data science Kickstarter course to learn what it takes to become a data scientist. In the meantime, enjoy the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of So You Want to Be a Data Scientist podcast. Today, I have with me Meg Thomason. She's a senior data scientist at Spin, and she holds a PhD in ecology. And I'm very happy to have her here. So, welcome, Meg.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So, let's start with our questions. So my first question to you is, what does your company do? What does Spin do?
Yeah, so we are one of a handful of companies that do short-term rentals of electric scooters. You may have heard them called e-scooters. They are in several cities across the globe at this point, and there's a handful of sort of top competitors you may have heard of. Bird or Lime. We are Spin, and our scooters are orange. So we're an e-scooter sharing company. That's really our primary focus.
Nice. Yeah, I'm very curious to hear more about what you do there. But before that, I want to ask about you. How did you end up where you are? So you're a senior data scientist, and like, what kind of journey have you been through so far?
Excellent question. And I'll say I listened to similar podcasts as this when I was trying to go through my journey, and I'm like really stoked to contribute. Um, so I started out life in education, focusing on natural systems conservation. To put it more simply, I think I was interested in saving the world. Uh, that took me in the direction of ecology. I was especially interested in plants. I still love plants. So I did an undergrad degree in plant biology. Um, I then followed that with a master's, essentially studying similar topics, and then followed it up with a PhD in ecology, as you mentioned. I was really interested in climate change and its impacts on sort of other forms of what we call global change, right? So, like invasive species is one example. I was just fascinated by like spatial patterns and competition among different plant species. And yeah, so I spent a couple of years as a researcher after I finished my PhD, and I kind of hit a wall. The wall looked like no jobs in my field, although I still really enjoyed the work that I was doing. And I thought, okay, what now? What are my marketable skills? And so I sat down in front of my computer while I was at work, don't tell my former boss, and I was like, statistics, coding, job. And Google told me that data science was a job that you can do, and it included both of those things. And I thought, okay, like this is interesting. So I kind of like let that mull over in my head and spent a bit of time researching what that meant. And I think the more I thought about it, the more I felt like it was at least worth learning more about.
Hmm.
Eventually, I left my job as a researcher, um, decided to enroll in a boot camp um, for data science. And that took me, I think the boot camp I chose, it took me about 8 months. It was all remote, which was good for me. Because I'll also say I am a parent of 3 kids. And so when I quit my job as a researcher, we could no longer afford childcare. So a remote program was kind of all I could do. Um, and then I think within a couple of months of finishing my boot camp, I found my first data science job. And that was at a company called Denali Publishing,
Hmm.
which was they closed up shop recently, but they were a mobile games publishing company. So that was kind of fun.
Hmm.
I got to work with mobile games. So yeah, that was sort of my journey from my previous passions into sort of a new space. And I can't say enough how glad I am that I made the jump. Um, I feel like I like the pace of work that I do now. I like the challenges. I feel like everything is there's just so much new stuff coming at me, and maybe that's partly because I work at a startup and have since I made this jump. But I just love that, right? It's like to compare to my previous life in academia, it was like, uh, man, one of the last papers I published, I think the research occurred over 6 or 7 years. So it's just a real different time span.
Yeah, I can imagine. But were you aware of the differences in work styles before you made the jump? Was that part of your decision making?
I was aware. I don't know if it was part of my decision making. I think I saw it more as like, oh, I hope I can keep up
Mm-hmm.
kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found that that's not an issue at all. I actually think it's much, for me, for my personality type, I don't know, much easier to stay excited and engaged
Mm-hmm.
when there's always something new happening.
Yeah.
So it definitely works for me.
Yeah. Awesome. Nice. And so you mentioned that you did a boot camp, which was for 8 months,
Yes.
which is a good amount of time. But did you take
Yes.
any other courses or did you like complete any other qualifications to become a data scientist, or this was the main thing?
That was really the main thing I did. It was called Springboard. Should call them out. I thought it was
Mm-hmm.
great. It was actually it used a lot of open source or like, otherwise available curriculum
Mm-hmm.
in addition to a weekly check-in with um, a data scientist like active in the field,
Mm-hmm.
as well as career coaches. And I feel like those two things were excellent. Like I just felt like they were the best part of the program
Yeah.
because it kept me on track. And they were really great at offering advice. But yeah, so it took me 8 months. It was very part-time. I
Mm-hmm.
will say that. I think I probably spent 5 to 10 hours a week on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely was not full time.
I see. But were you still working while you were on the
Um,
boot camp or?
I was working at a coffee shop as a barista,
Oh, okay. Nice.
just to kind of bring in a little bit more cash for the family and
Yeah.
felt like I was contributing. But honestly, that was actually really fun too.
Yeah, I mean, I can
Yeah,
imagine.
yeah,
Yeah, sometimes there were times when I was unhappy with my job where I went to like coffee shops and I just like dreamed about being a barista, and be like, this looks very fun. I bet I can like really
it
have
was
fun
pretty.
being a barista.
I feel like a lot of people would have fun. And you know what? I think looking back on it, I think it was kind of a good idea. Being in academia, like I feel like I was working in an applied field,
Hmm.
meaning I was interacting with stakeholders, like ranch owners and reserve managers and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
like even then, sort of pool of people that I interacted with was relatively small. Whereas like spending 8 months in a coffee shop, I interacted with so many people and so many different types of
Yeah,
people and
exactly.
who have different communication styles, right? Like your coworkers and all the people that are coming in. And so I feel like uh, it was just a refresher on like
Yeah.
how do I interact with people, which I think has paid dividends, as a data scientist. Where I definitely think that's an important skill is to be able to communicate your own ideas, understand what other people are telling you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I'm also pretty sure it helped with your data science studies too, because if you have a full time job, or at least even a part time job, then that you need to use your brain for, then you would be maybe way too
Hmm.
tired to like come back home and then start studying a whole new thing where you need to learn a lot of new concepts.
Yes, totally true. I think that's probably
Yeah,
that was a good call on my part without really
yeah.
realizing that it was.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you briefly mentioned why you chose data science, but was there any other reason that kind of like something that motivated you to choose data science?
No, I think it really was a bit of uh, like job market burnout. I don't think I was really burnt out on the work itself that I was doing. Although I will say there's sort of like two sides of that question, right? It's like why did I leave my last field and then why choose data science? I think as far as leaving my last field, yeah, like job market burnout, and which is to say, like there were maybe two or three jobs a year that made sense for me to apply to, which is just not a lot, right? At all. And then the competition was fierce. Um, the other thing I think that was a bit of a challenge was that my work was very field based, meaning like 75% of the year I was spending 3 and 4 days out of the office or lab, actually in the field, like in the out of doors, uh, hiking in strenuous terrain or kayaking, which doesn't sound that bad. I totally recognize that that does not sound that bad, but kayaking for work is a little bit of a different beast. I was studying rivers and wetlands at the time, um, but it was hard work, and I think it was a little bit of a premonition I had that like I don't really want to do this forever. Like this is fine now when I'm in my 30s, but like, oh, I don't know, forever is a long time. But yeah, why data science? I think the more time I spent in the ecology field, the more I enjoyed working with the numbers and doing statistics. And I was getting very involved in R, the programming language R. And so at the time, those are just the two things that I was really enjoying. And I thought, okay, well, what jobs out there can you do those things? Um, and I think at first I sort of considered doing analytics or statistics for a company that um, did something for the natural environment. Like trying to think of examples of what I was looking at. There was one company that was like the Global Climate Company. I'm probably completely misremembering the name of it, but I thought like, okay, like this feels like a bit of a bridge, right? Like from academia and ecology into something that was more like industry oriented. But like I said, my first job was at a mobile gaming company, so that kind of went out the window. And I'm totally fine with that. Totally fine with it.
Yeah, it's fine. Sometimes we just, keep looking for patterns and like things that make sense for our next journey or next adventure or next job, whatever. But yeah, it there doesn't always have to be logic behind the things. Sometimes things just feel right. And I think the jump that you made is pretty big, especially, after you do a PhD, which is a serious investment of your time to be able to choose a
Yeah,
whole new field. I think that takes a lot of courage. So that's awesome.
thanks.
Yes. So I also want to talk a little bit about your work right now because you're a senior data
Mhm.
scientist, and most of the time, the audience of this podcast is people who want to become data scientists, and becoming a senior data scientist is kind of like the holy grail of all aspiring data scientists. So more of like a general question first. Can you tell us what a weekday looks like for you? What kind of tasks do you work on?
Sure. So I'm going to take a pause and address, and I'm sure people probably do this often on your podcast, address the term data scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Like the longer I spend in this field, and by the way, I totally associate with or relate, I should say, to the feeling of like, oh wow, data science is like so exciting and sounds really interesting, and everyone like loves a data scientist, right? Well, anyway, I assume people love data scientists. Uh, um, the longer I spend in this field, the less I feel like I understand that term. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm beginning to feel that sense of like, what does that even mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I will say is at Spin, I started as a data analyst, and just recently, within the last like month, I think, we shifted our titles to either data scientist analytics or data scientist algorithms. Often, I think that when people think of data scientists, they think of machine learning and algorithms and artificial intelligence. Um, but I think inside companies in the field of like data in general, I think there's a bit of a shift toward recognizing the work that analysts do, like traditional analysts, I guess, as another type of data science. Um, so to get more at your question, like what's my weekday look like? I'll start with kind of an overview of the things that I work on and then kind of go deeper from there. So I at Spin am working with the product team. And I know product can be also another very vague term, like what in the heck does that mean? But at Spin, that means that I help product managers build features and refine features in the mobile app. So in order to unlock a Spin scooter, you open the Spin app on your phone and you say, look at the map and you look for where your scooter is and you can scan the QR code on the scooter, pay via the app, tell us how your ride was. All those sorts of things are all in the app, right? So there's this whole kind of like sub product at Spin, which is the mobile app. So I work on that. Um, I am very interested in how users interact with our features, sort of using their activities to get a little bit of a deeper understanding into like uh, whether they're getting what they need out of the app, whether they are finding friction. I think we all probably can think of an example in an app where it was like, why does it work this way? Like this is terrible. So we try to avoid that and use data to
Mhm.
define those instances. I also am working a lot with A/B testing, which is if you haven't heard of that, it's basically like designing experiments inside your mobile app, or you can also do them on websites, but in our case, it's on our mobile app. Uh, on, a classic example would be like, what happens if we change the color of a button? Do users interact with that differently? Um,
Mhm.
so I do a bit of that at Spin as well. Um, and then, sort of on a more like normal weekday cadence, I work on describing, um, or I should say, I write data requirements for features that are going to be released for the app, meaning a product manager says, I want to release this feature. The button is going to be blue or something. And then I come in and say, okay, great. If you want to be able to track that, you're going to need to track this action, this action, and this action. And then you can calculate your metrics in this way. So that's what I mean when I just write a data requirements document. I actually kind of love that work. I feel like when I describe it, it sounds a little dry, but it actually feels very familiar to what I used to do as a research scientist. It's like a lot of um, brainstorming and um, experimental design, and then sort of thinking about your statistics methods that will make sense in the context. So there's a lot of overlap there for me. And then I've also been working really hard at trying to clean up our sort of overall data structure. So the basic parts of a mobile app are the app itself, and then there are production tables that the app sort of quote unquote talks to, right, in order to like present you with things. So like the app will be like, hey, server, I need to display this scooter to the user. And so it'll like talk to the server and get information back, right? But then all of your actions in the app are also being tracked and logged and sent back to another separate database. So refining all that architecture, I think, is something I really love to do, like that bigger picture architecture, to make it easier for the company to understand where the data is going, where it's coming from, whether we can trust it. Uh, and it's hard. Like it's actually really hard, I think, because most companies have a pretty complex architecture. And in our case, it's actually not just the app talking to the server. The server then talks to a different server, which then talks to the scooters and then comes back. So it turns into this like game of telephone. Um, and there's definitely a lot of opportunities for things to fall apart or get misinterpreted by the code or something. So I just find that whole ecosystem fascinating, and it's something that I've been trying to work on. That's been, and we're making progress. I think we're making progress. The ultimate goal there being just better, easier to access data that is easier to understand and is trusted.
Yeah, that's definitely very important. I also feel like I don't know, maybe the last 10 years, data has been very important. A lot of companies have been trying to kind of jump on the bandwagon, but maybe some of them have been a little bit too fast that they didn't really think about their data
Hmm.
structures and how the whole architecture works. So now you get this mess and a lot of data scientists trying to fix this
Yes.
mess.
It is fun. I mean, I think that's how I try to see it. It's like, oh, cool, look at this challenge that we can try to address. Um,
Yeah, it's always, yeah, it's always nice to fix
yeah.
problems.
And I like to say at my company that we have a lot of, we may have a handful of problems, um, but they are all fixable. We understand them and they are fixable. That is much preferable to having problems that you don't understand or can't fix.
Yeah, sounds perfect. And
Yeah.
I mean, the fun part is just trying to come up with creative solutions to fix that problem, right? I feel like that's the whole point of data science job, anyways. Kind of keep finding projects and then keep solving them. And also the first thing
Yeah.
that you mentioned about creating the metrics, or like when they're creating a new feature, telling them where to look at, I think that's also sounds really fun to me too. I mean, yeah, I can see
Hmm.
how that might sound a little bit mundane to some people, but like trying to think of the corner cases or trying to think of how people might be using the app and everything, I just think that's very awesome work.
Thank you. I like
Uh,
it too.
that's great. So, a little bit about the way of working at Spin, because every company has their own way of working, their own team structure. So, I'm kind of trying to inform
Hmm.
people about how things work in industry, because some people have never worked in a tech team, for example. So, are you part of a
Hmm.
bigger team, or do you have people that you constantly work together, or do you have people working for you? What kind of structure do you have at Spin?
Yeah, great question. And this has actually changed at Spin over time,
Mm-hmm.
just based on how many folks we've had available to do the work that data team is doing. So we have a data team. We have a director of data. Um, right now we have 7 analysts, or of course, sorry, now we're called data scientists slash analytics. So we have 7 of those, and then we have one data scientist on the algorithm
Mm-hmm.
side, and we also have 2 data engineers. We This is a like relatively small team to serve. I would say probably another 200 to 300 um, folks across the business that are in other
Mm-hmm.
verticals. So by that I mean like the product team or engineers or business team or finance, marketing. That's another big one. And then we also have a huge vertical under operations. That's the folks that are deciding where the scooters are going, repairing scooters. We have a whole hardware team that are working to refine the scooters that we have on the streets, to make sure they last longer, work better, are safer. Um, so, like I said, we have 70 analysts. As we operate now, we each have sort of a dedicated business vertical, which is to say that we operate in sort of an embedded structure. It's not 100% embedded. We still, each of the analysts often will do work that sort of data team has defined on their own, meaning maybe nobody's asking us to define user retention, for example, but we feel like that's an important thing to define. So we're going to spend time working on it and calculating it. Um, we, and so like I was saying earlier, I work primarily with the product side of the organization. I have one other person, or like one and a half, if you will. One person who's also dedicated to product, another person who's dedicated both to product and
Mm-hmm.
finance, and sort of along those lines. So I think it's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to be completely embedded and really like maybe rarely talk to your data compatriots. Another way to do it is to be completely centralized, and which I suppose you could argue is a bit more on the agile side
Mm-hmm.
of things, where anybody can do any piece of work coming into the team, and you sort of work as one
Mm-hmm.
unit. So the way we work is more towards the embedded side.
Okay, sounds good. And so you are seven analysts, wait, sorry, seven data analyst data
Yes,
scientists, one algorithm data
right.
scientist, or the other way around.
No, you have it right.
Okay,
You have it right.
and you have two data engineers. and I'm sure
Yes.
everyone is working in different parts of the company or for the different departments in the company. And I'm also curious about the type of projects that this team is producing. Can you give us a couple of examples, if they're not
Hmm.
confidential, about what kind of data science things are being done at Spin?
Good question. So a lot of what we're doing, like I've already kind of described the product side, I think. Um,
Hmm.
some of what the folks are doing for, trying to think, for a business would be sort of assessing opportunities in new cities. And that could either be something that's more like a descriptive statistics type of model or something more predictive. Um, Same thing for scooter deployment. So it's a pretty big deal at Spin, just deciding where to put our scooters every day,
Hmm.
where to even, and then even where to move them around during the day. So, as with, I think, probably any other micromobility company, there's a lot of effort put towards optimizing that decision making process. Again, using sort of past data and describing what worked in the past, as well as predicting what might work well in the future, using metrics like scooter usage or revenue per scooter, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're collecting a ton of data, so there must be a crazy amount of things to do with that data.
Let me tell you, that's one of the reasons I was really excited to join Spin was just the complexity of it is pretty, like there's no shortage of things that you can look at here, right? Like not
Yeah.
only is there sort of time-oriented data, there's also spatial data, there's also all the user data that I work with. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Nice. And so this is different for every company. So that's why I keep asking this question to all my guests. What do you typically deliver? It could be you specifically, or it could be, your data science team. What is the typical deliverable for you?
Yeah, that is a good question. Okay, so I would say that most often I am delivering either the data requirements that I described earlier, sort of like data requirements or like an experimental design or experiment plan. I also deliver dashboards, um, which sometimes I feel like dashboards don't maybe get enough credit for what they are because often there's a lot of like work and thought that goes into what ends up on a dashboard, right? So it's like, what are the questions I need to be answering for this analysis? What's the actual analysis I'm doing? Am I using statistics? Um, are there any data issues, data cleaning? How can I best present this? What's the insight that I'm trying to convey? Uh, and then like what charts best convey that? Like there's
Hmm.
so many
Hmm.
different things I think that go into it. Um, that yes, so I would say experimental design and data requirements work as well as dashboards are probably my bread and butter at Spin.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you want to do a very good job at dashboards, then yeah, that's a lot of work. You cannot just put some charts together and say like you have a dashboard.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, I think one of the things we struggle with is um, making sure we do spend that time to make sure it's well thought out so that it's not just a one-off delivery, so that it can be continued to be used to answer either the question at hand or other questions that might come up that are related, right? So it's like more delivering a product that will be maintained and have a life of its own as opposed to here's a one-time thing and then everybody forgets about it.
Yeah, exactly. So what are the tools or frameworks that you use often to do this work?
Yeah, so we on the data team, we operate inside of a BigQuery data warehouse. Um, we are actually working on transitioning our BI visualization tool to Looker, which is owned by Google. And I'm trying to think of other tools that we use. We have an automation, so we kind of follow the ELT data pipelining process, meaning like extract, load, and then transform once you have it in your warehouse, essentially, as opposed to the old style ETL. So we have data coming into Spin in our warehouse, and then we at Spin use a tool called DBT, which is created by Fishtown Analytics, which is like a automation transformation tool. What's cool about it is it's like a batch coding tool, but you can use SQL to define your transformations, which I think the theory being that analysts or data scientists who do analytics um, are most comfortable with SQL, which is a point that you could argue. I wouldn't necessarily say I agree with that, but it's what we use, and I think it's actually been overall very successful in helping us develop a more mature data warehouse that then supports Looker uh, better, as opposed to just kind of like trying to do raw transformations in Looker.
Okay, nice. Nice. A good list of different tools that many of them I've never heard. But that's the beauty of it, right? Every
Yeah.
company uses a different set of tools.
Yes, so true. So true. I will say I do really enjoy working with Looker, but as with every tool, there are pluses and minuses. We were working in Mode before. Again, some pros and cons. It's very SQL friendly, which is great if your user base, internally is very comfortable with SQL, but of course is terrible if your internal users are not comfortable with SQL. Um, so we're trying to kind of come up with a compromise between ours. We essentially have both users at Spin,
Hmm.
folks that are very comfortable with SQL and folks that are just, would rather please just show me the chart. They really don't want to write the SQL.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that you work with product owners, if I got that right. And so you're helping them with their features and new features that they're
Yeah,
creating. But I'm also wondering how much of the work that you're doing is people facing.
a lot. Lately, as I get more involved in writing these product data requirements, helping with the data architecture, um, I'd say most recently I've been spending 80% of my time or more in meetings. Um, and I actually really enjoy that side of the work. I enjoy trying to kind of get the right people in the room to make the best decision, which I think a person on the data team is often uniquely positioned to do. Um, you know, Often on the data team, especially for like a company on the smaller side or a startup, like you really have to understand all the different components of how the company is working in order to best advise or consult. Like I often feel like on the data team, we're like consultants. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, I feel like we can get more things done and get them done the right way uh, if I'm able to get, like I said, the right people in the room. Of course, now it's Zoom rooms, but you know what I mean.
Would you say that your job became a little bit more people facing the more senior you got? Has that been a pattern that you recognized?
Yes, I think that's true. I think for me personally, I would like to move in that direction. I know that's not the case for everyone, and even at Spin, there's an option kind of to um, choose a path, right? Like, do you want to go in the people management direction, or do you want to go in the more advanced individual contributor direction? For me, I think I'm more interested in the first, kind of working on the people management, people wrangling, herding all the cats, getting things done. I like that work.
Yeah, it's great that they have the option.
Yes, I appreciate it. And then I think there's definitely a lot of space for more technically advanced individual contributors, kind of get into the like architecture level from a different side, and sort of the architectural level from helping teams build great products, and then architecture level from how do we design the systems to support
Hmm.
that. And I think it's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
nice. Okay, now we came to the my favorite questions of the whole interview.
Ooh,
First one being, what is the most exciting thing about your job, or the thing that you like the most about it?
that's a hard one. Um, the most exciting thing, what's been really exciting lately? We've had a couple of really great A/B tests results come out, and it's so cool to be able to share across the company. Um, I work with a product manager who is a really great data storyteller, um, way better than me. I'll say that. Uh, he So not only did we have this like really compelling outcome from like, hey, what if we do the feature this way? Wow, like we have a much better conversion rate for our onboarding, which is excellent, right? Like the more people in the app, the better. Um, and he was able to tell that story across the company in a way that got people really excited, and that was great. I think that maybe taking a step back from that, the things that really excite me about my job are being able to make an impact, which is one of the reasons I like working at a smaller company or a startup, is that there's just plenty of space to really do something that feels
Yeah.
important.
It's also really awesome to just see results in real time, right? You do something and then you see the results and then you can immediately be
Yes,
happy about it.
yes, that in fact is quite different from academia, where you're like, I feel like my experience was, okay, it's been like 6 years. Here's the results. Like, now it's going to take a year to publish my paper. Okay, there's the results of my paper. And even now, like, I don't know, 10 people have read my paper. Like, it's not as impactful.
Yeah, definitely. At least not in the short term. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Okay, so what about the most boring part of your job, or the thing that you like the least, let's say?
Sprint planning meetings. Um, I love sprints. I love tickets. I love Jira. I think it plays really well with my personality, but I hate the planning meetings. And in fact, I started volunteering to lead them because then I stay engaged and, awake. Because they can go on for a while. When you have like 10 people on a team, they last like an hour and a half. So it can get a little dry, but yeah.
So you're doing like exposure therapy for yourself.
Yeah. And I will say I've been able to make them shorter. I usually, when I lead the sprint planning meetings, they're a little shorter, probably because I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
God, let's just get this over
That's good for everyone, though, saves time.
with. Yeah.
Okay, nice. So I also want to ask you about how you experienced the whole field, because you were in ecology. I don't know how the female to male ratio is like there, but maybe you've probably experienced that in the tech world. We definitely have an unbalanced workforce. So I wanted to ask you if you have encountered any bias or any negative experiences so far that you had.
Um, Short answer is no. I don't think I have experienced any bias or negative experiences for the most part. I I agree. My observations support what you're saying. In ecology, I think it really depended on like the sort of subfield of ecology that you were in. The more statistical modeling heavy side of ecology was definitely more male heavy. Um, I will say that my experience when I interviewed at Spin, I had a 5-person panel's maybe not the right word. I had 5 interviews in a row, each of which were led by a man at Spin. And that definitely set up a red flag for me. Um, I still accepted the offer because I was excited about the work. And since I've been at Spin, I've actually been involved in the diversity and inclusivity committee. and working with recruiting to try to improve our recruiting pipeline, um, to bring in more women and minorities. And we're doing pretty well. I mean, when I started, I was one of two women in a 60-person engineering organization, which was a little bit, it gave me a little bit of whiplash. I was just like, oh, really, guys? Wow. And now we have like, I don't know, 11 or 12, like, and it's only been like 6 or 7 months. So I think we're actually making great progress. Um, and I don't see any reason for us that will stop. So I'm
Hmm.
pretty stoked about that.
Nice. Yeah, I love it when I hear companies, changing their culture to be more inclusive and also a little bit more have a variety of people, because I think it can only help companies too, when you
Yes.
bring in people from different backgrounds, people with different worldviews, and you just bring them in and everyone brings whatever they have to the table. It just creates more energy and better brainstorming environment, in my opinion.
I totally agree. And then I mean, and then on top of which, of course, we're now seeing everyone in their homes on all of our web calls. And I think, and especially for families with kids or pets or other family members, like everyone has a different living situation. And I think
Hmm.
it's been a little bit, it's pushed us more, I think, towards that sense of inclusivity and
Yeah.
appreciating everyone's differences.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe this whole situation will make everyone a little bit more tolerant of other people's lives, That
That
would
would
be
be
a
nice.
positive outcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for an aspiring data scientist or for anyone who wants to get into a data career?
I think probably two things. One, learn SQL. I know it's boring. Well, I thought it was boring. But I think it's such an important skill to have because you just don't, once you know it, then you don't have to worry about it, right? If you also know other coding languages, great. Python, R, whatever. But I feel like SQL is just a pretty basic one that is very transferable. The other thing I would say that I feel like I wish I could go back and tell myself is to not stress about the job title. Um, Try to find the thing that you feel like you'll be excited about and successful in. Um, One of the things I started doing, even more so in my second job search, was to type in my skills into the job search bar, right, on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever, whatever jobs website you're using, instead of the title. Like, so instead of data science, I would type Python, SQL, statistics, or something. And I feel like the matches I was getting were much closer, and I had a better rate of success, kind of like getting through the steps in an interview for a given
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah,
company.
that's a very great tip. And I think that's also a very good approach to looking for a job, because at the end of the day, I feel like, before you become whatever the title is, data scientist, data analyst, whatever, you really have very little information of what your responsibilities are going to be, so you don't really know what you'll be doing. So instead, looking for the skills that you already have or the skills that you want to improve on. I think that's a great strategy. I never really thought about that before. I'm really impressed. Thanks for sharing that with everyone.
I didn't make it up. That was from a Springboard career coach.
No one else needs to know this. Nice. So this is very awesome. So thanks a lot. That was the last of my questions. Actually, it was very nice having you on the show. I felt really awesome chatting with you. It was really fun. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure. I agree. This was a lot of fun.
Nice. I'm very glad to hear that. Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to take my free data science Kickstarter course to learn what it takes to become a data scientist. See you next time.